Joining us now is Dr. Cole Beeler, infectious disease specialist at IU Health. We are always happy to see him. Welcome.
Hey, how are you?
Good, good. Thanks for being on.
Yeah, thanks for
Well,
having
wait, some people, from what I understand, are putting off their second dose of the Moderna or their Pfizer vaccine because of this Johnson& and Johnson blood clot scare. Um, what are your thoughts about putting off a second dose of the vaccine? Is this something that is possible? I mean, is that okay?
Well, I mean, to start out, I would say that, the FDA has, said that the Johnson and Johnson vaccine can continue to be given. The one thing that I would say is that we're going to discover these small signals of potential side effects, and some of them might be severe, but it's all risk analysis, right? So the risk of you getting a blood clot from COVID is actually much more than you getting a blood clot from the Johnson and Johnson vaccine. So still getting the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, I think, is advisable if it's the fastest vaccine that you can get and the easiest one that you can get. It's a one-dose series. For those who have already gotten one dose of their Pfizer and Moderna vaccine, I don't have any data to say that you waiting to get your second dose is beneficial and safe, to be honest with you. And actually, what I would recommend would be starting over if you wait longer than the recommended time period, just because you get boosters at a certain amount of time in order to capitalize on the immune response that's already been started by the first dose. This two-dose series, we know, protects at a greater than 90% rate for Moderna and Pfizer. We don't know how well it protects if you delay that second dose. It might be okay, but right now I have no evidence to say that you would be protected to the same extent. And because of that, would recommend starting over.
Wow, that's so interesting because I'm wondering if they've sort of developed antibodies, but then maybe they have waned. I mean, given that you just said that starting over, should we then be testing for antibodies before they start again, or does it even matter as long as they're starting to build up?
Yeah, I mean, if we had a good test to check for immunity, we would certainly be doing that very frequently. But unfortunately, the antibody test for COVID is unreliable. There's patients who have had COVID where you don't have an antibody. There's patients who have never had COVID, as far as we can tell, and have antibodies. So there's positives and false negatives in both directions. So I wouldn't even rely on that test to reliably say who would need an extra shot or who wouldn't need an extra shot. It may help, but I wouldn't know if you would get the same durability from your vaccination that we're seeing from the two-dose series. You might be okay, but in general, all the science is really pointing to sticking to what the original trials showed in order to be able to get to that population immunity that we're trying to achieve.
And this is just something that I was thinking about today. I'm not sure. I mean, gosh, we all want evidence-based things, and I'm not sure. So if you're not comfortable answering it, that's completely fine. It was just sort of a train of thought.
Sure.
When someone has antibodies, like, I mean, we're saying we're not really sure how reliable those tests are in sort of antibodies. But if someone does have antibodies against has previously been infected, has antibodies, is this vaccine a layer of protection, or could there be maybe too much antibodies? Is there such a thing?
No, I wouldn't be worried about too much. I mean, as a matter of fact, the more the better when it comes to viral bacterial infections that we immunize against. We don't really know. And I think this could potentially change in the future where people who have had COVID before might only need one dose of one of the vaccines and still have the same protection as people who have only gotten two doses. But we don't know that yet. And the only thing that we do know is that two doses provides very high level protection. We also don't know how people who are naturally infected compared to patients who have had vaccine. And there may be difference. And because of that, just because you've had a natural infection doesn't mean that you're protected the same as the vaccine. As a matter of fact, the vaccine's probably shown some early signals that it might be more durable, it lasts longer. The immune response, it might be a little bit more hardy than a natural infection, which is really great news. And I think strong argument to get the vaccine, but we unfortunately need to follow the rules that the researchers use to administer the vaccine, because that's what we know works. Anything else is a guessing game.
Right. And Dr. Beeler, especially as you said, we don't know who might need a booster, or who maybe at some point one dose might be fine. And then it also sort of depends on how severe your case might have been in terms of your COVID-19. I mean, the antibodies last data that I looked was a while ago, but when you have a less severe case, they tend to wane more quickly than a severe case.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. It's the worse you are hit, the higher probability you're going to have a more durable antibody response or a longer duration of antibody response. But it's really hard to tell what that means in real life. We know that the lab might hang around for longer, but the immune response to COVID is multifactorial, and it's not just the antibody that's used to protect us. It's also our cells, our T cells. It's very difficult to measure. So just because your antibody goes away, it doesn't necessarily to me mean that you're not able to kill a virus. A lot of this has to be kind of done in research trials and understood at a little bit of a higher level before I think we can confidently comment from the medical community side of things. So I don't know. I mean, I think that getting the vaccine, even if you have been vaccinated, probably gives you extra protection and is worthwhile in the long run.
Right. I mean, I don't know. It's sort of just interesting. What would you just say to those people who may not even be fearful because they were really just being extra cautious? And like you said, I mean, we don't know if it's because maybe they had COVID or they had some underlying condition, and we just don't know. Maybe not those who are sort of hesitant, but just had this feeling that, right, maybe they'd read on the internet or something, which is, we don't want Dr. Google over here,
Yeah.
that it's fine, that it's completely fine just to get one.
Yeah, I mean, based on my analysis of the data, it does seem like this clot risk is real, and it seems like it is coming from the vaccine. So I do
Okay.
think that the vaccine is
Oh,
associated with
okay.
clot. That said, I think the association is so small compared with the very real chance of getting COVID and getting a clot in real life that makes much more sense to take the chance with the vaccine than it would to take the chance with not being vaccinated at all. I think that's the reason for re-releasing this into the population for administration, is that there's a lot of adverse side effects like this, like Guillain-Barré and Bell's syndrome associated with other vaccines that are so small that the benefit of getting the vaccine far outweighs those small, infinitesimally small risks.
Mm-hmm.
I think the jury's still out with some of the other vaccines, and we could expect to see maybe some of these with Pfizer and Moderna. It would not be unheard of. But the risk with COVID now still, I mean, I'm seeing patients in the hospital right now. We're still seeing patients die of COVID. It is still out there. It is still killing people. It is still very, very real. It's getting better. It's a lot better than it was before, but we still need protection, and it will come back if we don't vaccinate the most people that we possibly can.
Wow. Well, and can I ask you what makes you say? I mean, I haven't done probably as much research as I should have in terms of the blood clots really being associated with the vaccine. And what's that mechanism there? Is there something in the ingredient? Because I know they're different. One is an mRNA vaccine, and the Johnson and Johnson, from what I understand, is different. The makeup of it.
Yeah, I honestly don't think that we really know
Okay.
why the protein vaccine, the Johnson and Johnson, is similar to or is causing the effect on platelets that it's having. Platelets
Mhm.
are little pieces of cells that help stop bleeding, but also if they're used inappropriately can form clots. And the mechanism of the development is almost like an autoimmune condition where the body starts causing platelets to aggregate. It's something similar that we can see with heparin. And we've got a lot of patients that we put on heparin almost on a daily basis in the hospital, and it's a pretty rare complication there. But the pathophysiology seems about the same to heparin-induced thrombotic thrombocytopenia. I don't know why we would see this with the protein-based vaccines versus the mRNA vaccines. We have also seen it with AstraZeneca, which has a separate mechanism of action, and it seems to be fairly similar in presentation to some of the Johnson and Johnson patients. But they're very, very small numbers overall. So getting any sort of theme between the different patients becomes challenging when you have those small of a number.
Right. I think I read it one statistic, and I'm not sure, but it was 0.007%. But then again, nobody wants to be that 0.007%. But then again, you don't want to be that percentage of a person who does get COVID and doesn't need to be hospitalized or pass from this when we have this vaccination.
Right. I mean, exactly. You're exactly right. And that's the math that we're trying to do from a population level, right? Is that if you get COVID, we know that you've got a risk of having a deep venous thrombosis in your leg that can break off and kill you and go to the lungs. We see that actually very frequently with severe COVID. So it's something that from my perspective, the best thing that you could do as an individual would still be to get the vaccine, even if that's Johnson and Johnson, because your individual risk of getting COVID right now is still actually pretty high. And getting the vaccine actually allows you to start getting back to normal, starts letting you get back into the community and doing the things that we used to do back in 2019.
Wow. Yeah, I know. I know a lot of people are really excited about that. I remember we had a conversation a couple of weeks ago, and I just remember we were talking about like, what is the first thing that you're going to do, like when we feel safe again, to be able to do something back to normal. Can I ask you that question? What is the first thing that you're going to do when you feel good enough to unmask or be safe? Or, I mean, for me, maybe sometime this summer, I'm going to go paddleboarding with my friend, which seems so simple, but it's not.
Sure.
Maybe took that for granted at some point, but no, I can't wait. That's the first thing I want to do.
Yeah. So my wife and I have been vaccinated for a while now, and we have started going out to Mexican food on Fridays. That's like our favorite thing in the entire world. And just to put a plug in for El Rodeo, that's my jam. And, we missed it so much. Margarita Fridays were totally something that we had missed, and being able to get back to that and feel more comfortable with it, post-vaccination is something that's really a game changer. So, it's smaller risk now certainly than it was over the winter. There's a lot less COVID around, but the vaccine provides this extra layer of comfort that if it starts resurging, we do have that backup immune response to protect us if we get exposed inadvertently.
And I guess I want to ask you, how are we doing in Indiana in terms of vaccinations? Are we there yet? Do we need to move along a little bit quicker? What are your thoughts?
We've stalled out a little bit with vaccinations across the state. And, a part of that, I think, is just because the people who have gotten the vaccine and were excited to get the vaccine have gotten the vaccine. And now what we're dealing with is maybe people who are still on the fence, and people who are just never going to get the vaccine. Doesn't matter what you tell them. So it would be nice to push more. We certainly have a lot more population that we need to get vaccinated, and we're kind of in the middle of the road, last I checked, with states as far as percent population that's been vaccinated, comparing to the other states. So it could be better, to be 100% honest with you. And because I don't anticipate us getting actually to what anyone would consider to be a herd immunity threshold that was cited in maybe some of the earlier studies, I would expect the need for boosters coming up next season, maybe as early as October, September, November time period, with the flu vaccine, in order to make sure that the next variant is covered.
Well, right. I mean, just that you said in terms of boosters, I remember the CEO of Pfizer came out and said, yeah, we're going to need boosters. And then there was a man I read the other day who was in the, I think, Pfizer trial last April, and he's gotten his third shot. So in that time frame. So who knows? We don't, we're not sure about those things. But yeah, I guess if the CEO is going to say maybe we anticipate a booster, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, so the predominant variant right now is the UK variant, which is more infectious than the previous wild type variants. I expect that eventually there's going to be something like the South African or the Brazilian variant where the vaccine probably just doesn't work as well. And what that means as far as severity of illness or infectiousness or needing repeat boosters is to be determined. But I expect that the vaccine companies will continue to update their vaccines such that they have coverage for these new variants as they come out. But the best way to stop these variants is to smother them, right? Is to decrease their fuel source. And that is making everyone possible immune. And that for those who aren't immune, to keep them away from getting the infection. That's how herd immunity works. So we really need to work as much as we possibly can in order to try and get as many people vaccinated as possible.
Right. And then I'm sorry, last question here, if you're willing.
Yeah.
I've heard this Oxford is just started this human challenge trial in terms of infecting individuals in the study with strands of the coronavirus. Human challenge study. What are your thoughts on those? I mean, that's pretty brave for those people to participate in.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we've done human trials challenges for decades to centuries. At this point, as long as people understand the risks and know what's going on, and the patient subset is one that has a very, very low probability of having a bad outcome, this would give us the data that we needed. So proper informed consent is extremely important with this process, but we have a lot of expertise even locally through Stan Spinola's lab with doing human challenge experiments for humans with other pathogens. And it gives you really unique understanding of how the body's going to react to things in a closely monitored environment that provides invaluable data for how to approach treatment, how to approach expectations for worsening. But again, in the younger age groups, which are probably what they're trying to select for these trials, the chances of a bout outcome are very, 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 very small. The chances, especially in a monitored setting, of you developing the appropriate immune response and being able to allow the researchers to collect data, I think outweighs the risk of you having to go to the hospital or getting sick. So they've looked at this stuff. I mean, all of this is running through their review processes to make sure that it's safe and appropriate. And I think it's going to provide some really helpful data.
I think so too. I mean, it's just like you said, we've done these for decades and centuries. This has been a part of science. It's not something that is unethical in any means, and it's provided a lot of answers for things that we've needed to know, and for people who are willing and being closely monitored in this sense, and this having that review board review all of the methods and everything, and being closely monitored. I mean, I would do it, like for the sake of science. I mean,
yeah. I mean, yeah, I think, and again, I mean, so it's very important just to reiterate that this is done with the individual having complete knowledge of what the risks are, because there's bad stories from history of us doing this inappropriately to people who maybe didn't understand all the risks from what they were doing and what alternatives there were. So the review process on this and the informed consent is absolutely huge. But like yourself, I mean, this is something that if young people are willing to do it, it would actually provide us with a huge leg up based on understanding the pathophysiology compared to where we're at now.
Yeah. And these are the variants, correct? I mean, it's not somebody who's already had just the first mutation. Are these the variants that they're testing against?
My guess is that they're looking at multiple types, but
Yes,
I can tell you
yes.
for sure.
Yeah. Okay. I just went over that briefly. Dr. Beeler, always great to see you. Really, really good stuff here.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Anytime. Nice to see you too.